Thank you. That was so generous. I'm so excited to be here for the whole semester and tonight, and to engage with all of you and talk about writing. And I'm happy to kick things off tonight with two different pieces. I'm going to read one story from the collection of stories there, and then several sections from a novel that I'm working on now, and let's do it. Yeah. The story is called Filch and Rot. We started out as petty thieves, picking up the mulch-worthy crab apples from neighbors' lawns. We poured water into the vodka bottles in the basement. We took swipes of our brother's deodorant to cover up our sour smells because it had a better scent than anything the pharmacy had to offer us young ladies. We fished the tubes of lipstick out of our teachers' purses. They all wore the same brand, CoverGirl True Shine. In a town with so few options, why were they ignoring the other brands in the drugstore aisle? Surely some teacher with some popularity had spread the word that True Shine was the best product, and all the other teachers had trucked over to the Walgreens or the CVS to smear samples on the thumb edges of their hands. While our parents watched movies or failed to listen to each other in arguments, we tucked out the back doors. We set up shell games on the street with the lipstick. We'd uncap the tubes and spin out the shades. Mrs. Ball wore muted powder pink shine and applied hers until the waxy stick ended in a flat plateau. Mrs. Pullman wore blush berry shine and rounded off the tip of her tube. Finally, we flashed Miss Withers's hoary, bright crimson Valentine shine with a perfectly maintained diagonal. Cosmo had told us this shape of lipstick proved that Miss Withers was the moody, daring role model we all hoped she was, riding around town with the young shop teacher, his hands rough and smelling of oil, his eyes full of promises and splinters. We'd cap the tubes and lay them down on our piece of cardboard outside the Circle K. Our hands would move fast, sliding the tubes around each other. Powder pink blushberry Valentine we'd call, like we were conjuring something. Cash had been laid down. How our parents never heard about the con girls shuffling lipstick outside the Circle K, we didn't know, and thank the good Lord above out loud. But in our minds we thought, someday they'll hear and they'll need to confront us, and would that be so bad? We were fast with our hands. We'd rotate in rosy shine and mauve shine that looked so much like powder pink shine. We'd shake our heads sadly when the mark picked the wrong shade every time. Just tell me how you do it, Bobby's father asked us, but we knew if we didn't tell him that he'd come back with a theory and empty his wallet again. It wasn't long before we started picking up other people's orders at the fast food chain. One of us would order a soft drink and we'd sit with our backs turned to the line of people. We'd wait to watch a harried mother pass us to settle her children in before the food was up. And when that number was called and the mother was still pulling off her children's coats and digging up one more booster seat, 3 of us would file out. One would go smile sweetly at the young pimpled boy who went to school in the next town over and wrap her neatly manicured fingers slowly around the top of the bag and say in a voice so breathy it would blow through the boy's twitchy dreams, "Thank you." And meet us outside where we'd walk to the forest preserve and eat the bits of chicken and plain hamburgers ordered for the kids and the fish fillet sandwich the mother had fooled herself into thinking was a favor to her health. We had been the smart girls, but we'd started getting pretty and thievish. We used our smarts to find workarounds instead. If we only had time to write 2 pages of a 5-page research paper, we printed out the pages we had and then stapled them to 3 blank pages and ripped those pages off, leaving a jagged triangle of paper where no more research had been. We'd slide this paper into the middle of the pile, and by the next day or the next week when the teacher had sorted through the papers, she would have to tell us she was so sorry, but it appeared some of the pages of our reports had been lost. Could we please reprint them and turn them in ASAP? And we said we'd bring them the next day. Shanna kept saying, "So we bought some time. What's the big deal?" Stole that time, I reminded her. We started cutting class and trolling other neighborhoods, watching people's routines. We noticed people loading their cars with suitcases. We counted family members leaving the house. We had a pattern down. Jana checked all the windows, Eve checked all the doors, Kathy looked for spare keys, and I sat out front, ready to call out if I saw something suspicious. We never went in without an escape route, an alley, or some woods behind the house that we could disappear in. We took TVs until we had enough of those. We took jewelry and movies we wanted to see, and bottles of liquor and stuffed animals that stared at us saying, "Take me with you." We could have taken a lot more with the intention of selling it, but we behaved modestly. Most of all, it was the thrill we were stealing. We rubbed dirt into the hems of our skirts and dusted our sandaled feet until they were an ashy gray. At home, we exclaimed our wonder at what people would throw away or drop off at the dump. Our fathers smiled at the new TVs, but our mothers knew that any self-respecting proprietor of the trash heap would have kept that TV for himself. "Eleanor, you can't keep a stuffed bunny from the dump. You'll get red fever or cholera." She pronounced cholera with a ch, and when we heard that noise, our minds felt vindicated. We'd shrug and hug the animal tight, then place it in the arms of our little sister, and she'd run off thrilled, and our mother would give us a look like, "You've just murdered your little sister, hope you're happy." And we were, not because we were killing our sisters, but because we knew how our mothers were failing. In the winter, we planned. The snow slowed us down. We had big downy coats to hide our bounty in, but we hadn't figured out how to avoid leaving footprints around the houses. We barreled around each other's rooms, sifting through the jewels we purloined, letting loose an expensive kind of laughter. Our mothers would knock on our doors, convinced we were getting high. When no smells shaped the right way, they'd walk around the outside of the house looking for our windows to be open, for toilet paper tubes with dryer sheets to be aimed out into the winter air, but they were always shut tight. We saw our mothers in the side yards making tracks of their own, and we waved enthusiastically, the wide expanses of our faces undamaged by fear of being caught. Our mothers inhaled sharply, their nostrils stamped together by the freezing wind, their khakis wet to the knee from not having bothered to put boots on instead of house sneakers. When our friends left, our mothers would ask to talk to us. "Are you involved in hate and destruction?" they'd ask. They'd comment on the asymmetry of the family as we grew and distanced ourselves. They began to worry, and we all felt moments of sympathy for them, but we shook our heads just the same. "Is this what it is to watch your daughter grow?" they asked themselves as we walked away from the table. We shaped our fingers into guns as we rounded the corner and shot at our heads. We stole all the photos of ourselves from this time. We stole our mother's passwords and deleted the photos of us off of their computers and slipped pictures out of the frames lining the halls. "No," they'd say with big worry in their voices, "this is the end. I'm putting up with your secrets, but I won't let you take my memories." Our mothers would hunt our rooms for them to no avail. We didn't think about how someday we'd like to look at who we were. Our mothers hugged us tightly, trying to convince us to return to our old selves, the selves in those photos. "You're soaked through," they'd say, but it was our mothers who were coated with sweat, like dishes too early out of the dishwasher, squeaky and startled. It is not uncommon for a person to first imagine someone else showing their symptoms in an attempt to objectify the pain and disease. Our mothers told us we smelled naked and ripe, and when they got close enough to hold an ear to our hearts, they recreated the burbling with wet sounds, their clammy tongues flicking around their mouths. "Decay," we whispered outside their other ears. All those manners and ethics were being pulled loose of us like too many bones, coyotes and vultures burying them deep to savor at a later time. First, the lifeblood drains to the dependent parts of our consciences, and that lividity rises up behind our expressions. The muscles of our decency refuse to uncouple. Our honor cools to a temperature of consensus. Froth and rupture, our minds pillage themselves. New colors marble through the veins of our principles. Our hair slides out, our skin slips. The maggots feed on us and squirm away to make their own code. We turned rotten is all, autolysis and putrefaction. Our morals were breaking themselves down, blistering, aided by the outside world that hunted out any point of weakness to feed on, bloating, all that integrity burglarized by blowflies and filched by gut flora. A vibrant person will rebuild herself. Only the dead break down. And so this is from I call it my haunted house novel, but I don't know what's haunted. I can figure it out. But it's called The Grip of It, and I think all you need to know is that there are 2 narrators, but up until a week or 2 ago there were 3, so at the end you can all guess what the 3rd narrator was or who it was. And this is the prologue. Maybe we move in and we don't hear the intonation for a few days. Maybe we hear it as soon as we unlock the door. Maybe we drag our friends and family into the house and ask them to hear it, and they look into the distance and listen as we try to describe it and fail. You don't hear it? It's like a mouth harp, deep twang. Have you ever heard throat singing? Ancient, glottal, resonant, husky and rasping, but like it's underwater. When we are alone in the house, though, we become less aware of it, like a persistent dull headache. We're deaf to the sound at first until the still silence of ownership drifts over us as we settle in. Maybe we decide we will try to like the noise. Maybe we find comfort in it. Maybe an idea is easier than an action. Maybe we make eye contact with the elderly neighbor next door. He watches through his window, the moving truck pulls up. We're frozen on that odd instant. Maybe Julie's foot breaks through a plank on the front porch when she steps outside to phone her father to let him know we've arrived safely. Maybe the board breaks months later while enjoying the weather with a glass of lemonade. Maybe we fix it right away. Maybe we ignore it for a few months. Maybe we try to convince ourselves that we should get settled before worrying about any repairs. Maybe I make one of the hidden rooms in the basement into my dark room. Maybe I start taking photographs of everything, of the stain on the wall, and of Julie putting all the mismatched dishes away in the cupboard, smiling, and of the neighbor emerging onto his front porch and retreating almost immediately. Maybe it's the neighborhood children who ring the doorbell. Maybe it's just some faulty wiring. Maybe that faint chiming is something else entirely, a thing we will only recognize later. Maybe there's a reason to fear something as simple as a doorbell. Maybe we're foolish to stay calm for as long as we do. Maybe there are times when I hear a sound and Julie doesn't. Maybe sometimes Julie cocks her ear and says, "What was that?" and I haven't heard a thing. Maybe it's possible to become deaf to something, to block it out. Maybe it's not there for both of us to hear at the same time. Maybe we should remember our fear of the undercurrent when we go to the beach. Maybe we should stay inside and tell each other stories that are farther from the truth. Maybe we should share something genuine for once, stories from the deep, honest pits of us. But what if those buried, fetid stories are the ones that have bubbled to the surface? What if they're right there, balanced on the edge of our teeth, ready to trip into the world without even our permission? Chapter 1. The real estate agent with his waxy hair and perma smile keeps stopping to listen, waving his hand, saying, "That's just the house settling." We think the house seems more than settled and wonder why he's calling so much attention to the sound, and look at the handsome dark wood trim and how many... Hope it doesn't happen again. And how many closets are hidden within closets, and we stare out the picture window at the woods butted up against the backyard, and we probably wouldn't have heard a thing if he hadn't mentioned it. But there is a noise, and now that we're listening, it is unsettling how much it sounds like moaning, but not the bellow of someone in pain, more like an incantation, some sort of ritual snarl. And so we look at each bedroom carefully, hoping to be proven wrong about this place, hoping to find something that convinces us the house is not, in fact, exactly what we've been seeking. And we ask the agent if we have to worry about crime living so near the woods, and he explains that on the other side of the woods is a beach, and there is nothing to be afraid of but waves. And we smile politely, but in our minds we are thinking, a wave can overwhelm you, and a wave can take you away. We snag on that, but the agent is barreling forward, hustling us to the unfinished basement and pretending not to hear the sound in a distractingly obvious way, and he disappears around a corner and we follow him only to find him gone. James and I look at each other, concerned, until a section of the wall spins around and there stands the agent saying, "Secret compartments. There are several of them in this room alone." He emerges and squats down, lifting up a 3x3 section of tile to reveal a small finished crawl space below us, just an empty concrete cube. And he reaches above his head and punches up a drop tile to reveal another pocket above, lit and finished looking. And then I reach high above my head, trying to push against other tiles, but they all stick firmly in place. "Why?" I ask. "Well, the previous owner seems to have been a bit of a homebody," he says. "We know that, but we're not sure about the purpose of the hidden rooms. They make for a ton of extra storage space, though." I squeeze James's hand and he squeezes back because we have this way of feeling the same about unusual things, unexpected occurrences. And I know, like me, he is excited about the secret passages, and this is just one of the places where we are seamed together. This is just one instance where we twist in the same spot, mirroring each other and meshing at once. There's a stain on one of the walls, a grayish wet blotch like new paper mache edged in black, and we ask the agent about it and he says water damage. There was a leak in the top of the foundation, but it's been fixed. Another crush of our hands together and we wind our way back up the stairs. Chapter 2. When we move in, the stain is bigger. I ask Julie if she thinks so too. She nods, even as we stare at it. It seems to inhale a little, lungs expanding. Could we have thought it seemed smaller because we were so eager? Probably. I place my hand on it, it's dry. I push my nose up against it, it smells bitter and mossy. Do you think a leak might still need fixing? Julie shrugs. She's beautiful when she shrugs. I'm thankful for this woman who is random about what she chooses to place her worry on. Her simultaneous unpredictability and practicality fascinate me. It had been just months before that Julie and I had sat in our apartment in the city. We draped over each other on the couch in a way that felt so familiar as to be impossible. The way she rested her legs across my lap, the grip of my hand on her bare kneecap, all of it was so perfectly fitted and worn in that we were barely aware of being touched by the other. I'm not saying that we didn't take an interest in each other. I mean that the ease with which we found ourselves in each other's company felt so natural neither of us wanted to mention it. We feared jinxing ourselves, every angle of the space between us rounded, every doubt settled. It was in a moment of comfort and quiet like this that we sat looking around the apartment wondering what could come of us. Julie had always said there's no reason to leave this city when we can just move to another neighborhood and it can feel entirely different. This was true until it wasn't. Her parents had left the city not long before. Her stepmother convinced her dad to settle further south for the winter. With their departure, Julie realized she was free to leave as well. I don't see why not, I told her. Julie, with her pragmatism and will, started imagining what she might like to do somewhere else. She had a job title that meant nothing to people outside of her office. I wrote code for startups, but I will be the first to admit that I did sloppy work. I repair holes in the code with duct tape that causes breaks elsewhere in the structure. We talked about what sort of place we'd like to go to, another city, another country, somewhere more remote. We didn't want to live in the middle of nowhere, but we could stand a smaller menu of everyday options. We readied ourselves for a place where we'd get to know the business owners and ask about their children and weekend plans. We'd bring leftovers to the neighbors and talk about our gardens. We'd want to be able to come back to the city easily to see friends and experience culture. Julie started hunting for jobs a couple hours outside the city. She found an opening at a company where an old classmate of hers worked. Julie emailed me job listings in the same town and around it. I told her I wanted to find a house first. Once we knew where we'd be based, I could focus on where I'd push off to each day. Julie didn't put up a fight, but I could sense her frustration as she clicked from the Help Wanted It page to the real estate section. Julie got started working remotely while we looked for a house. The town was small enough that there were only a couple clear job opportunities for me, and I drove down to interview in person and stopped at the house on the way back to the city. I'd already lost track of how big it was. I wandered up the walkway, fit my key into the lock, and turned it the wrong way. The lock was installed backwards, and I wondered if this was something I could get used to, or if it was something I'd put in the effort to have fixed. Maybe I would become an engaged and invested homeowner, interested in cleaning and repairing things that I had ignored as a renter. The entryway was small, large enough for 2 people at most, with a built-in mirrored hat and umbrella stand positioned across from a mirrored closet door. Standing here between the reflections, watching the small hall extend out and a prism on both sides made the corridor seem larger than it was. Beyond that, the living room waited, warm and inviting. I lifted a window seat to find nothing at all. I pulled at the glass door of one of the library cabinets and it stuck, making a clashing cymbal of sound when it finally budged free. The living room wound around a wall into what we would set up to be the dining room. Dark wood paneling blended into a heavy bass touch. When we looked at the house, we thanked goodness for all the furniture already built in, solidly couched in the walls. It meant we wouldn't need to acquire as much to make the transition from a small apartment. A swinging door opened into the kitchen. Every appliance proved itself ancient, yet incredibly maintained. The sorts of items that would have made a killing at auction and were bound to cost us a fortune in utility bills. I headed up the stairs. To the right lay what would be our bedroom, a guest room, a hall closet, the master bath. To the left stood more doors. I heard a louder humming up here, as if the light were trying hard to reach the hall through the open doors of the rooms. I saw a shadow fall through the doorway of one of the guest rooms and felt a surge of fear. I edged toward the room, but saw nothing inside. The fear was replaced by relief. It must have been a bird flying too close to the window. The quick change in emotions left some nausea behind that I chalked up to worry over change. Out the window, I saw the next-door neighbor sitting in his living room, framed by his house, Victorian like ours, but in a more advanced state of disrepair. It seemed both of our homes might benefit from a fresh coat of paint and some updates. The man sat very still. I leaned in with worry. In just a moment, though, he turned his head. He looked directly at me, as though he'd felt my stare on him. I gave a quick wave, and he looked away. He massaged his hands and fixed his eyes back into his own home. Weeks later, after I'd found a job and we transported our life to the small town, we carefully unloaded our car full of breakables alongside the movers, strapped with 3 times as much as we could carry. We paused between loads to look up at our new house. When the neighbor's front door eased open with a stiff, loud scrape, the sound drew Julie's eye. "That's him, huh?" she asked, craning to get a better look. Julie moved to raise her hand, but the door was already closing. She could have a sweet, useless way about her when she thought it might serve her. After this failure, she set back to work, lifting the next bulky box and stepping toward the house carefully, her view obstructed. Chapter 3. I prefer to unpack quickly, eager to organize. I'm going to skip this one. Let's get to it. Chapter 4. On my first walk through the woods, I find neighbor kids playing a game called Murder. One kid has to hide and think up a way to have been killed, then the other kids have to guess how it happened. I can only see one kid hanging over a high branch. I hear the others below trying to determine how the body has gotten into the tree. I try not to get too close, worried I'll interrupt. I walk through the woods to the beach. I sit and ponder how that child was murdered. I stare at the water, trying to remember how we'd found the house. Back at home, I ask Julie. She says, "Oh, I have a clipping here somewhere." She sifts through a pile of papers, signed mover contracts, first utility bills, a plethora of coupons. "I know it was here," she says. "I kept all of this stuff together." The language was odd, something like, "The right house has found you," and it talked about all the space, needing updates, nature nearby than you could dream, but I can't seem to find it. Not to worry, I was just trying to remember on my walk. Julie gives me a sly look, full of skepticism. "James, you wouldn't remember, because I was the one doing all the looking. We know descriptions hold no stock for you. They're not real enough." She scoots her chair toward mine. She wraps her arm around my neck. "And that is one of the reasons I love you, because you are right here and you focus on the physical world, and it's lovely." She kisses me. I want to argue. I want to say that I remember finding different listings in the real estate sections, but she is more or less correct. I kiss her back. Chapter 6. I grab a beer on my way home from work. The bartender tells me my face is new. "Where are you from, stranger?" he says. I tell him, "We're from the city, but we just moved into the big house at the end of Stillwater." He looks up sharply. "The end of Stillwater, you say? With the wraparound porch?" "Yeah." "Well, they've all got wraparound porches over there, so you're not helping me much, but you're saying the last one, right before the woods. Is that right?" "That's the one," I say. I take a sip. "Why?" "I know a bit about that house. Do you?" I pause. "I know I live there. What else is there to know?" "There's a family who lived there for a long time, parents and a handful of kids, little slices of people. They were pale, fuzzy." "But what about them?" Well, the boy child was seen so little people wondered if he was real, shined like a shaded bulb, if you know what I mean. Now the girl I knew a bit about because my buddy dated her back in high school. She had troubles. My friend was never allowed in the house, but he was enamored for a short while until her father told him not to come near her anymore. I ask the bartender for more pretzels. He refills the bowl with a warning. "Careful, those suckers are just going to make you thirstier, and then you'll be wobbling your car home like the road is a tightrope." "I'm a hungry man. I'll take a glass of water, too," I respond. The bartender fills a pint glass for me and continues. Now, the girl had a habit. When they were out, she'd keep scribbling in a notebook or on a napkin or any little scrap of paper she could dig up. My buddy said he didn't think she even knew what she was writing most of the time. She'd just fill up a piece of paper and then flip it around and start writing the other way. Layers. He said he wondered if she was listening to him when he talked, but she could carry on a full conversation while she wrote. I'd say he was a little relieved when her father forbade him from coming around. He wanted to understand, and he was getting the idea he couldn't. So what happened to her, I asked him. Oh, she ran away from home not long after that. Her parents died, and then the state tried to track her down but couldn't, so they ended up putting the house up for sale. I asked for my tab. I thanked the bartender. I'll be back in case you think of any more stories, I say. The bartender looks at me like I've misunderstood. Chapter 7. James is late getting himself home from work one night, and I tell myself I can take a few hours off from unpacking. I wander the yard surveying what needs to be done, and behind the house where the birches are dense, like teeth in a mouth, I find what I'm convinced is a grave. Maybe it's the way the foliage grows weak there, or the way the stones are lined up at the short end of the plot. It doesn't even seem like it's a secret that's trying to be kept. A large bird circles overhead, but I know it's my imagination that makes it a vulture. And I look back to our house and then the house next door and see the old man in the window for only a second, and I wonder if he knows something about this. Could there be more of them? I wander around, rooting with my eyes in the backyard and through the forest with no luck, and on the other side where the forest meets the beach, I stop looking down and lift my head to the water, and my windpipe is overwhelmed by a gale, and my breath clogs with the force of it, and my mouth fractures into a grimace as I gasp, and I squeeze the meat of my arms, and I try to harness my heartbeat to calm myself, and my nostrils feel full of sand, and the potential of the moment paralyzes me. There's a second where running into the lake feels like an irreversible decision I should make, but the voice suggesting this is one I don't recognize, and in this way I haunt myself until I turn back to the house and let my mind peer from above. I'm feeling unusual, not in a way that I can explain, really, but preoccupied with the sounds the house is making and unnerved by the space that fills each room and surprised by how quickly I've become accustomed to the wilderness surrounding us. But it's more than the combination of all this. I feel like I've turned a full circle inside myself, like I'm due to unwind, like I'm a spring coiled tight, waiting. I wonder if moving here was a mistake, but then I push that thought away and replace it with thoughts of the stress of uprooting our lives, of starting a new job. I want to share this story with James, but I wonder if I should wait until I know the ending. I dash that thought away quickly too, wondering why I would want to wait, how I would bear it on my own.